Finally, we are back now for a new episode of NHL Deal or No Deal. We are now on episode 10. It's been about a month since I've done one of these, and the biggest reason why is because some of those previous episodes got a little bit repetitive. It seems like the same names were always brought up in the trades, you know, guys like Rasmus Ristolainen, Jesse Puljujarvi, and players like that. So I thought I'd wait a month, get some, fresh names in trade talks, and we definitely did. Guys like Justin Faulk are now thrown around in the trade rumor mill, and then we had the Patrik Laine situation, so I thought you guys did a pretty good job of freshening it up for this episode. So I posted on my community tab about an hour and a half ago, NHL Deal or No Deal coming later today. Comment your mock trades down below, picking in 1 hour. Try and refrain from Puljujarvi and Risto trades as the previous episodes were flooded with them. And like I said, I think you guys did a pretty good job of coming up with some new ones. So without wasting any more time, let's jump right into the video. The first mock trade of the video comes from Zeke Parrott, who says Florida trades Mike Hoffman to the New York Islanders for a second and a third round pick. Now Florida fans might be looking at this and say, whoa, we need way more back in return if we're trading away a guy like Mike Hoffman, who just had 36 goals, which was a career high, and 70 points, which was also a career high. But you have to take into consideration that he will be a UFA next summer, and I honestly think there is a good chance we could see him traded somewhere else throughout the season or maybe around the trade deadline, because Florida used up a lot of their cap space this summer. They signed Bobrovsky to that massive $10 million contract, and I honestly don't think they're going to have the money to bring a guy like Mike Hoffman back. So maybe if things aren't working out, there is definitely a good chance that they could ship him off and try to get something in return. I definitely think the Islanders would probably have to throw in a roster player who can kind of step in and fill at least some type of role for them. But looking at it from the Islanders' perspective, I definitely think they could use a guy like Mike Hoffman, and maybe this would be like a rental because, again, he is a UFA, but they probably will have the cap space at the end of the season to be able to sign a guy like Mike Hoffman, and they could definitely use a good scoring top six forward like Mike Hoffman is. So I actually like this trade a lot. I'm going to say no deal just because I think New York would have to throw in one more extra piece, but I really like the idea of the trade. Moving along, we have a comment from Fat Kid Inc. who says Laine to Edmonton for Ethan Bear, a second round pick, and Nugent Hopkins. Edmonton gets what could be a 60 goal scorer next to McDavid, and Winnipeg gets a great prospect D-man and a pick and someone to replace Laine on the roster now. Now, honestly, I really like the idea of this trade because if you ask me, what does Winnipeg need right now? I think they need a second-line centerman in the worst way possible, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins could definitely fill that role for them, and they'd be getting a defensive prospect in Ethan Bear back, and their back end is kind of been depleted over the summer, and it definitely could take another massive hit if Dustin Byfuglien doesn't decide to return. But this is just a trade I can't see happening. I feel like it's somewhat unrealistic, but if you pair Patrik Laine to Connor McDavid, you could definitely say he should be a 50 goal scorer year in and year out, and I feel like Cheveldayoff would definitely get flamed a lot if Patrik Laine went to Edmonton and became like a superstar with Connor McDavid and, get flamed for trading him away. I like the idea of the trade again, but I'm just going to have to say no deal because honestly I really don't know what Patrik Laine's trade value is. Moving along now, we have another Patrik Laine trade, and this one comes from this one guy who says Winnipeg Jets trade Laine and Eric Comrie to the Columbus Blue Jackets for David Savard, Alexander Texier, Josh Anderson, and a 2020 first round pick with top 5 protection. Now that top 5 protection part is very important because there is a good chance maybe Columbus could finish towards the bottom of the league and be a draft lottery team, and if that's the case, then that pick would become very valuable. So I like that you threw in the top 5 protection. That was definitely smart, but this is definitely an interesting one because getting back for Winnipeg, you would get a solid defenseman in David Savard, and Winnipeg definitely could use another defenseman or two to really bolster that D-core after a lot of it was taken away this summer. And then you get a young prospect in Alexander Texier who definitely showed a lot of upside, and you never know, maybe one day he could be that second line center that the Winnipeg Jets need. And then you get Josh Anderson, who's not so young, but he's still, in his mid-20s and just had a really good year, 20 plus goals this past season, and he definitely should be able to do that again. And then you're getting the first round pick. That definitely is a pretty nice return. And going back the other way for Columbus, obviously you're getting Laine, who is a young potential superstar in the making, and then you get a young goaltender in Eric Comrie, and that's never a bad thing to have, especially considering they just lost Sergei Bobrovsky. So I actually like the idea of this trade a lot, but again, it's just so difficult to gauge what is a good deal for Patrik Laine because because he is so unpredictable. He could go back to the player who just, had a really rough season this past year, or he could blossom and become like a 50-goal scorer. So we really don't know, and for that reason, I guess I'm going to have to say no deal, but I definitely like this trade a lot. Moving along now, we have Wizard Tower, who says Leafs receive Julius Honka, and the Stars receive a second and a third round pick. Now, Julius Honka actually has requested a trade away from the Dallas Stars, and he definitely is a guy who some teams could be interested in because he's a young defenseman who really just hasn't worked out in Dallas, and I honestly don't think things will work out there, so it definitely would be best for him to get a fresh start with a new organization. And Toronto is a team, and after this season, their blue line could be depleted because you have Tyson Barrie, who's going to be a UFA, Cody Cece's contract is coming to an end, same goes with Jake Muzzin, so definitely if you could have another young defenseman who could potentially step into that lineup next year, that could help them. So I'm actually going to say deal to this one. He's definitely a cheap option as well, and the Leafs need cheap options back on the blue line. So I like this trade. Dallas would finally be getting rid of him, but getting some picks in return as well. Moving along now, we have a trade from West Kotu. Hopefully I'm saying your name correctly, but they say the Habs receive Shane Gostisbehere, and Philadelphia receives Noah Juleson, Paul Byron, Arturi Lehkonen, and a 2020 second round pick. Now, if this trade were to happen, Montreal fans and the organization would probably be ecstatic because they have seemingly been looking for a left-handed shot defenseman for a while now. They were very interested in Jake Gardiner. That didn't work out, and if they got a guy like Ghost, I think that would be huge for them. He's a really good offensive defenseman, had a little bit of a down year, only 37 points, but the year prior, a 65-point guy, and definitely was one of the better offensive defensemen in the league during the 2017-18 season, and I think he probably evens out a little bit next year and is like a consistent 45 to 50 point D-man, and that definitely is pretty valuable in today's NHL. And looking at this trade, I just honestly don't think Philadelphia would be getting enough back for a guy like Ghost, who still is only 26 years old and is on a very team-friendly contract at a cap hit of only $4.5 million through the 2022-23 season. So I'm going to have to say no deal for this one. Moving along now, this one comes from Sir Donkey, who says Vancouver receives Jake Bean and Carolina receives Olli Juolevi, two young defensemen, and they basically just be getting a fresh start. I don't think Olli Juolevi is at that point yet, though. He definitely has the potential to maybe make the team this season, but I wouldn't bank on it. But maybe another good year in the American Hockey League, and then we could see him up on the roster for the 2020-2021 season. Honestly, I'm going to have to say no deal. I still think Olli Juolevi has a lot more to give and a lot more potential than Jake Bean has. I honestly feel like Jake Bean is just not really working out for Carolina and definitely could use a fresh start somewhere else. But honestly, a swap like this, I definitely think Carolina would be the overwhelming winner, so I'm going to have to say no deal. Moving along now, we have a trade from Matthew Hurley, who says Faulk for Kasha. Now, there was a lot of rumors, I believe it was like a week ago or a week and a half ago or something like that now, but like it was seeming like Justin Faulk was going to be traded to the Anaheim Ducks, but he does have a no movement clause, and he can kind of orchestrate a trade if he is to be traded, and he seemingly shut down a deal to Anaheim, and this definitely does make sense. I feel like Justin Faulk is probably a guy who wants to compete and win right now, and going to Anaheim, I don't really see that as a situation, compete and win right now. And if this trade were to happen and Ondrej Kase did go back the other way, I think Carolina would be the winners because they already have more than enough defensemen, and getting a guy like Kase, who can be a very good top six forward in my opinion, would make them the overwhelming favorites to win this trade in my opinion. So I'm going to say no deal because it's basically almost already happened and Faulk kind of turned it down. So for that reason, yeah, I'm going to have to say no deal. Next up, we have a trade from Frankie McDonald, who says Rangers receive Faulk and a second round draft pick, and Carolina receives Chris Kreider. Now, yes, New York definitely could use another blue liner in my opinion, but I don't really think they want to give up a guy like Chris Kreider, or I feel like they probably would have traded him away already because he's definitely a very valuable asset to that team, and I think they want to keep him around, maybe have him mentor a guy like Capo Caco, who definitely has the potential to be an unreal player. But yeah, I think New York could definitely use Chris Kreider, especially since they are trying to compete, and while yes, bringing in a guy like Justin Faulk would most definitely help their blue line, they kind of already helped their blue line this summer in acquiring a guy like Jacob Trouba. So for that reason, I'm going to say no deal. I can definitely see where you're coming from, and it does kind of make sense, but from New York side, I think I'm going to say no. And now finishing out the video with a trade from Carson Lambo 724, who says the Kings trade Jonathan Quick to the Devils for Corey Schneider, Pavel Zacha, a 2020 first, and a 2021 second round pick. I'm going to say no deal to this one right away, just because I feel like the Devils will be giving up way too much to bring in a guy like Jonathan Quick, who kind of just had an abysmal season. Yes, I think he is an upgrade in goal over Corey Schneider, and they definitely could use that. Giving up that first round pick is definitely scary because maybe things don't go so well and all the new faces don't gel together and they have a bad year and maybe they miss out of playoffs, and then there you go, that's a lottery pick immediately for the Kings. So I like this deal a lot for LA's side. They'd be getting a guy like Pavel Zacha too, who still definitely has some upside and is a young player, but he just re-signed in New Jersey. I don't see them trading him, and yeah, I think this is too much to give up for quick, so I'm going to say no deal. So that is going to wrap up episode 10 of NHL Deal or No Deal. Make sure you guys let me know down in the comment section, what would you say to all these trades? Do you think they're good? Do you think they're not good? And if you guys have any predictions on some players who could be traded in the up and coming weeks, make sure to let me know that as well. Make sure to drop a like on the video if you enjoyed and subscribe to the channel for daily NHL content, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.